This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
Well, welcome to the Sunday, what's becoming our staple, the Church of Bard. How are you, Gary?
I'm well, Mark. How are you?
Very good. You know, hearing Dawson's voice, have you been following him recently on Twitter? He seems a little feisty as of late. What's going on with the awesome Dawson?
You know, fans of the water cooler will know that we have long mused that when you check the time codes on some of Dawson's tweets, that's a good way to know when he's having a night, so to say. So if you check some of those time codes on those tweets you've seen, you'll see some of them were in the 10 p.m. range and some of them were in the 4 a.m. range. So Dawson sounds like he's been having a good weekend.
Fantastic. I haven't seen him in a while, so I miss him. So I'll reach out. He's made me smile several times this week.
Me too. He's doing well. You know, I still am seeing him every now and then, albeit virtually via Zoom, but he's doing well and he's hanging in there. It sounds like he's trying to work on moving his somewhat elderly parents down here to SoCal to be closer to him. So I think that's consuming a lot of his time, but he's doing great. Fantastic.
The a couple of interesting stories this week, side by side. The first one is probably the last one that I sent you. Can you put up the New Jersey judge who is having has been reported on this week, having a battle? I wish we could find his tweets, by the way. Apparently, this judge, who is, there you go. We don't have any of his tweets, do we?
We don't. Judge Gary Wilcox here out of New Jersey has apparently been posting TikTok videos under a pseudonym and singing along, sometimes in his robes, sometimes in his chambers, to rap songs that have explicit lyrics. And he's come under fire as a result.
His pseudonym, though, is of a very well respected New Jersey criminal defense lawyer, is it not?
Yes, I believe that's true. I'm not sure if I have it here. I had it earlier. It's
and some of these lyrics, but part of what he's doing is apparently TikTok videos under a pseudonym, which is curiously or not curiously the same last name as a prominent criminal defense lawyer in New Jersey. And he's rapping, for instance, to Rihanna songs, correct? Or
yes.
Lip syncing to Rihanna songs on a TikTok video under a pseudonym. And now he's come under fire.
Yeah, absolutely. He has. I believe they found that like 15 of I believe he has a little over 40 videos available on his TikTok, and they found that several of them, over 10, have violated what they're saying are ethics violations.
Yeah, and which is interesting to me, that I guess a judge has certain things that he can't do. I suppose hindsight's 2020, he probably wouldn't have worn a robe, although, a robe is nothing more than black cloth. I mean, if he's not posing I just wish we could see him to play him so we could analyze whether or not this really is something that they should be prosecuting a judge for. And coming on the heels this week of another opinion, which we have the order on, which was out of the federal court. I think the Jersey judge, Judge Wilcox, is on the state court, former AUSA federal prosecutor, Harvard law educated, very well thought of. So I would want to see more things before I would start criticizing the fact that the guy likes to do TikTok videos. But you never know what the backstory is. Speaking of which, before we get to that other order, and never knowing the backstory, Gary, because I don't know that we ever had him on the podcast, but that for decades, Lin Wood was somebody that I considered a friend and a spectacular lawyer, and then had this, if you will, detour into the whole Stop the Steal and representing. And unfortunately, this past week he retired. Did you see this?
I did see that. It looked like he was under 2 potential ethics violations, and he was going to be in trouble with the state bar. And he just decided, with that in mind, he was going to go ahead and retire to avoid the situation. And yeah, I remember you speaking of him with extreme reverence, several years back, long before the Trump thing became an issue, and the Kyle Rittenhouse thing. He was a lawyer that you spoke of very highly.
Yeah, Lin, I think the first time I encountered him was in connection with John Benet Ramsey, where he represented the Ramsey's parents. He then, when I was representing Gary Condit and the Condit family during the Chandra Levy thing, the kind of brouhaha, he then was representing Mrs. Condit, and successfully, I should add. And over the years, also he represented Richard Jewell. You remember the Olympic bombing?
Sure, the Atlanta case.
Yeah, that was a case of his that he did well. He tried a case against Elon Musk in California, and it was last time we kind of crossed paths. That was the one with the pedo accusation, but Elon was not found liable, and just it's horrible that Lin. I'd love to shift the focus as Lin's early 25 or 30 years of practice, because he really was kind of a go-to guy in the defamation free speech world. But in the last 3 years, those who were on the losing end of that whole kind of brouhaha, which would have been John Eastman, who's presently right now on recess in the middle of his state bar trial here in California, Lin Wood, Sydney, what's her name, and the others have really suffered quite a backlash to their giving of advice or supporting the losing side, so to speak, which then brings me to the case I just referred to. The case out of Louisiana. Do you have the order that was issued, Gary?
Yeah, I do. It's I believe it's Judge Terry Doughtry, and he issued a sweeping ruling that basically, what it boils down to, the government is not allowed to interact with social media companies. Correct?
Yeah, and if you scroll down, there's certain exceptions, but it's quite an order. And at one point in his opinion, and it's a very lengthy opinion, what we've got up on the screen is technically, if you, as you can see, urging, encouraging, pressuring, and inducing in any manner social media companies to change their guidelines, emailing, calling, sending letters, or engaging in any communication, urging, encouraging, pressuring. Elsewhere I believe it's in the opinion itself, he says that what the evidence was that, let's see if you've got it. Here are the exceptions that we were talking about: national security threats, extortion, illegal campaign contributions, informing social media companies of threats that threaten public safety. These are the exceptions to this kind of blanket order. And this shall remain in effect pending resolution or further orders from this court, the Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, or the Supreme Court. Now, interestingly, there's been quite a debate in the last couple of days. And by the way, he did not certify this as a proceeding as a class action. And this was done on, interestingly, this order was issued on the 4th of July, and he characterized the efforts presented in the evidence before him as being one of the greatest threats to free speech in the history of the Republic. And so that has occasioned people on, and I know people get upset sometimes when I say this, but on both sides of the spectrum, I'm not going to say aisle, but both sides of the ideological spectrum, to kind of weigh in and be speculating as to whether or not the Fifth Circuit, which is the circuit over this location, whether they will come in and enjoin the order itself, or whether this could make it to the U.S. Supreme Court. Potentially,
it's also been pointed out that this is one of the most conservative appeals courts in the country, and with that in mind, it's also been pointed out that they have ruled against this particular judge on a recent ruling that he had that many conservatives thought they would not. So while this is, a sympathetic court to this particular judge, they have had cause to go against him in the past.
Well, it's interesting. He's a Trump-appointed judge. Eileen Cannon, who's the judge who's handling the espionage case on Trump in Florida, also a Trump-appointed judge. The 11th Circuit, which is over Eileen Cannon, has smacked two of her opinions reversed, which many people were raised their eyebrows above. So it's very difficult, I think, to prognosticate how the circuit courts are going to come out, whether it's conservative or liberal or so-called Trump or Obama appointed judges or Biden appointed judges. It really, a lot of times it's fact determinative, and also how sweeping is the order. This is an incredibly sweeping order. By the way, a lot of this has to do with the topics that we've been talking about for the last 3 years: the origin lab, COVID lab origin theory, the so-called anti-vax, all the suppression of speech. And there was a great deal of evidence that was presented in front of this judge where he made a lot of fact determinations. Normally, when you embed as a district court judge who's handling the trial or the hearing, and you make a lot of fact determinations, unless there is an abuse of discretion, normally you can inoculate or insulate yourself to the degree that the observations and conclusions are based on facts as opposed to the legal analysis. Although I think there's going to be an argument that they can take in the Fifth Circuit, that the Fifth can take a look at this de novo. Interestingly, I think on either Friday or Thursday, the Biden administration, obviously because it's this is kind of a broadside against them, filed a notice of appeal. So this is clearly going to the Fifth Circuit. But it's an interesting where we are with speech in this day and age, that you've got a judge who in New Jersey who's doing TikTok videos, and we're going to prosecute him. We've got John Eastman, who at one point was a well-regarded dean of a law school here in California, being prosecuted by the state bar to try to defrock him for his legal advice that he basically was not listening to credible experts. We've got Lin Wood, who was asserting that he believed that these things were, that the election was stolen, and he had evidence to that effect, resigning under protest. Speech is in a, what I would think, one of the throes of one of the great kind of reckonings that we've had in recent times. Especially when you apply it to lawyers and judges. I mean, that is and the government. We've got there's in defamation law, it's one thing, but here you're talking about people who are advancing legal theories that others, or there's the old expression, winners write history, and losers get impaled. And so you can make an argument here that that's what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we go a little bit north of the border, we also have an interesting case involving speech when it comes to Canada. I don't know if you saw this story this week, but a judge.
You're talking about the grain case?
Yes, I am.
Please tell people, because this is a fascinating case too.
Yeah, basically a grain salesman wrote up a contract to sell a bunch of grain. He sent it to one of his longtime customers as a picture. He took a picture of the contract and sent it to his customer via text. the customer, who had apparently engaged in contracts in a similar fashion multiple times over the course of the years, sent back a thumbs up emoji. And the court case ended up playing out where the sender of the emoji claimed that he was only trying to acknowledge that he had received the contract, and the grain salesman was saying, nope, I've got multiple instances in the past. He was agreeing to the contract, and I was trying to deliver the grain, and I never got paid. And a judge agreed with that gentleman that the thumbs up emoji now constitutes a signature on a contract, at least in Canada.
Yeah, I'd say it's a fascinating use. And the judge had some language, didn't he, about emojis in there that I thought was interesting?
Yes, he did. Let's see here. He said that basically that he had delivered the grain as contracted in the past, and after terse communications that was the case. Sorry, I'm trying to find the exact wording here.
So it's interesting. A lot of times that's governed by UCC and kind of the for those who attended law school, they'll remember or took the bar exam, the various permutations of acceptance offer and the elements thereof, especially among merchants and those in the commercial arena. But it's an interesting evolving of how you interpret certain things. Now, I wonder if you did a crying emoji, if that would be that price is, you interpret that as the price is too high, or if you do a laughing emoji, or you got to be kidding me, that's the price is ridiculous. So very, very very interesting. Now, there was another one that Brett, our fearless researcher, had come up with that I thought was interesting too. You have that in the litany of kind of our roundup for the week.
You speaking about the new case out of Florida?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, Governor Ron DeSantis on Friday signed a measure that will overhaul the state's alimony laws. The measure includes doing away with what is known as permanent alimony. DeSantis' approval came a year after he nixed a similar bill that sought to eliminate permanent alimony and set up a formula for alimony amounts based on the length of a marriage.
For those of us in California, you'll know that you often see the spouse hang around, whoever the one who wants to be on the receiving end of the alimony. They want to vest after 10 years, because once you vest, then generally that means you get a lifetime of support. A crass political analysis here, and I've always said, with the caveat that I've avoided family law like the plague for 40 years. The crass political analysis is that the people who want to escape California for your taxes, you also want to escape California for having vested alimony obligations for the rest of your life after 10 years.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting case. Along with eliminating it, the measure sets up a process for ex-spouses who make alimony payments to seek modification when they want to retire. So I thought that was an interesting thing, and they play into whether or not there's a likelihood of the person going back to work. So, it's not like you can raise your hand at 41 and say you're going to retire and, hope that a few years later you'll go back into the workforce. They're watching for that.
Yeah, it's something. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well. So I can see fights over jurisdictional fights where somebody may move from California, where they've got a lifetime order, to Florida, and I'd love to see how that plays out.
Yeah. So where do you want to go next? We have a story out of the U.S. Congress, and then we also have some news out of France that I thought was interesting.
I think the news out of France, and then we'll tie it up with Congress.
Yeah. So to give a little backstory here, recently, for anyone who hasn't been following along, recently a 17-year-old, forgive me if I'm butchering the pronunciation, but I believe it's Nihil Merzak, was killed in a traffic stop in outside of Paris. And I have the video if you want to watch it. It's a little disturbing. Yeah,
it's disturbing, but I think it's important because this contagion, so to speak, I think will spread.
All right, so for anyone who wasn't watching, he's driving a Mercedes, and he's been stopped by two motorcycle officers who have come up along the driver's side of the vehicle. They are speaking with him, one from, I would say, in front of the driver's side rear view mirror, one from sort of the back seat window. So they're sort of flanking the driver's side window from different sides, but both on the driver's side. And they're giving him instructions. He's not following them. He starts to move forward, and then the driver in the front position in front of the driver's side mirror fires a shot, and the driver continues on and subsequently smashes into something, and he's later found to be dead. Passengers in the car try to run and are caught, and the police, before the video that we just saw, put out a statement saying that the driver's life was in danger, or the officer's life was in danger. That the
life was in danger. Something.
Right.
It's amazing that some things are universal. How many times have I said that in all of these cases that I end up representing the family of somebody who's either killed or maimed, it's always that's the standard retort is the officer feared his life was in danger. Remember Daniel Shaver, where there was a movement, or remember the case in Utah where he turned around and or the Partridge where he said drop your weapon, and they execute. So it's always an officer. That's they always will tell you that the deadly force, and here is occasioned by the officer's fear. And here we've got it even in Europe.
Yeah, and initially what they basically said was that the driver was in a position where the officer rather was in a position where the driver accelerating or moving forward was liable to run him over. And then this video came out from a citizen after they'd put out that statement that clearly shows no, they weren't going to run anyone over. I mean, at worst maybe a foot, but they weren't in a position where they were going to wholesale run the officer down. And the police have had pretty bad egg on their face as a result, and Paris has been burning for roughly a week now.
Yeah, and by the way, this is having political ramifications, but the reason that I was fascinated by this is the parallels to cases here in the U.S. we think are just something that's unique to the U.S. And here you've got virtually, I could give you a litany of cases here, but you've got the same thing. You've got a police statement, a police position that is articulated. And then very shortly on the heels of that, you have a tape which completely undercuts what has been represented. And you can understand the furor that causes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been noted that, a large percentage, I believe upwards of 25 or 30% of those protesting are under the age of 18. It just seems like there's a big upheaval in France. Interestingly, while not commenting on it, I found it interesting that GoFundMes were set up for both the police officer and the deceased, and the police officers has been wildly more successful. There's been over $1.2 million in contributions to his, while the victim's family has received, I believe, somewhere in the $400,000 range. So just an interesting insight into how the French population is reacting to this.
Well, I wonder, it would be interesting to see, just as a sociological experiment, if the funding for the officers went up in proportion to how bad the riots got, because there is always that interplay that when you have civil unrest after a shooting, of then people reacting, and whether it's going in one direction where you want to burn it down, or going in the other direction where you want to almost authoritarian or totalitarian response.
Yes, and I'm by the way, that is a very good point, and I'm certain that is a component of it that played into it, because this has, as we said, been going on for a little while now. This was something that happened, at least 7 days ago, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. Now back to the U.S. and Congress.
Yeah, controversial figure Marjorie Taylor Greene was booted out of the House Freedom Caucus, which, if you haven't been paying close attention to that name, that's the group that kind of ground the speaker situation to a halt a few months back. And apparently this comes on the heels of her publicly calling another member, Lauren Boebert, a pejorative openly on the House floor.
This interestingly, politically and legally, where this is headed, as you kind of summarize that, even though she was in the Freedom Caucus, MTG, she also was kind of the wingman for Kevin McCarthy in getting the speakership.
Yeah, she was.
I don't think that there's anybody who would disagree that absent her support, he would not be the speaker. And the House Freedom Caucus has been in kind of a fractious relationship with the speaker. And so once she goes with a pejorative, that's the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they've basically come out and said that there were, it was a bit of a fractious relationship even before this. And this was somewhat of the straw that broke the camel's back. You can't be calling another female member of Congress terms like that, in the public. It just does not a good look, and they can't have that associated with them, I think. Yeah,
I don't know. I think that's probably the analysis. I know that, if you remember the speakers fight, Boebert and Getz were on one side of that, MTG and McCarthy on the other, and it got heated towards the end on whatever the 15th or 16th vote was.
Jewelry is having a big moment right now, and with hundreds of products popping up in your feed every day, it can be hard to find a brand you trust. Alex and Ani has been creating meaningful jewelry for over 20 years, designing pieces that connect you with all of life's important moments. With an emphasis on value, there's truly something for everyone. You might be most familiar with their signature charm bangle. This bracelet literally created the category of meaningful jewelry and had you stacking charms from your wrist to your elbow. This piece is an icon for a reason. Completely size inclusive, each bracelet is adorned with a symbol designed to tell your story and express your unique style. Beyond the bangle, you'll find stylish, affordable jewelry for every occasion, from classic pieces to bold statement looks. Don't know where to start? Alex and Ani makes it easy to unpack the trends you're after and sprinkle in your personality too. Each piece comes with a personalized message and meaning, truly making it the perfect gift. You can take comfort in knowing that you're shopping with a socially conscious brand as well. To date, Alex and Ani has donated over $60 million to nonprofits worldwide, connecting fashion and philanthropy in an easy, fun, affordable way. Visit alexandani.com right now to discover the confidence that comes with a perfectly accessorized piece of jewelry. Right now, Alex and Ani is offering our audience 20% off with code MIDAS at checkout. Again, head to alexandani.com. That's alexandani.com and use code MIDAS at checkout for 20% off your order.
All right, you got time for one more story?
Absolutely.
Twitter.
I'm going to just point out here, you curate very well. I mean, we may start to have you be the official curator of Sunday Bard.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's as we come to have Sunday be the tradition, I've taken to sort of spending the week kind of picking out stories that I like to get your opinion on, because you and I don't get a chance to talk as much as we'd like.
Even though many times we're in the same building.
Exactly. I see you walking by above me, and you're on the phone, you're dealing with other business, and you've got a lot to attend to. So I just kind of keep my list running, and then this glorious, half hour, 45 minutes that we have on Sunday, I bang them out and get your opinions, and it's the best part of Sunday. All right, Twitter lawsuit alleges that Wachtell, Lipton, and Rosen ran up $90 million tab before the Musk takeover of Twitter, and it appears that they're also alleging a $71 million success fee that was added to billable hours, which the in-house counsel for Twitter approved in the hours leading up to his takeover against Musk's instructions.
So Wachtell Lipman is, I believe their sole office is in New York, and they've got a great reputation, kind of a smallish firm with a large outside footprint. They negotiated a success fee. Now, people may say that's the most outrageous success fee I've ever heard, $71 million. Remember, Elon Musk in that fight when he was buying Twitter was forced to pay $44 billion. And when you're talking about $44 billion as opposed to what Musk was trying to pay, that's a heck of a delta. The thing that I'm sure drove Musk crazy is if you read some of the lawsuit, 10 minutes before he walked in the door carrying the sink, kind of taking over, Twitter wired out the $90 million to Wachtell 10 minutes before. I can see where that probably drove him to distraction, because here he is, he's acquiring Twitter, and literally 10 minutes before he walks in the door, there's a wire going out to the law firm for Twitter, paying them that success fee and their hourly. So.
And if you've been following along, that might have been one of the last wires that went out to anyone who was providing services for Twitter, because there's been allegations that they've kind of stopped paying anyone who's providing them services, and possibly that's what's led to some of this tweet limiting stuff. But yeah, I can see where he'd be frustrated, because as you say, it's, while not a large number in the context of the $44 billion he had to pay, or the billion he would have had to pay to walk away from the deal, or the $30 billion that he was trying to pay as a result of the changes in valuations on the company. It's 90 million or 70 million, whichever part you feel is egregious, is not an inconsiderable FU with 10 minutes to go on the clock.
Tell me about it. Now, you notice what's also happened this week is that they rolled out Threads, which is owned by Meta.
Oh,
and
yes.
now Musk is suing them, claiming that they've hired all kinds of ex-Twitter employees in order to launch what they believe is a violation of their intellectual property over Meta. So no wonder they want to have a cage match.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for anyone in the tech weeds, it's a very interesting situation, because although it's only launched in the US so far, and has not launched anywhere in Europe as a result of the DCMA, Meta has a much, much, much larger built-in user base than Twitter has ever had. And they're doing it in such a way where basically any Instagram user can just one click and all of a sudden they have a Threads account. That is a Goliath size feature to be able to launch something new. And the fact that they got to, I believe it was 30 million users in the first 5 days or something, I mean, that has really re-energized the Meta staff. And this took something that was on, a team of a dozen to 24 employees, and nonetheless, it undoubtedly will have 5x that many people on it by this next week, and maybe the same by next week.
How many people are on Twitter?
Estimates vary, but I believe it's about 300 million. And to contrast that, Meta has several billion on Facebook, and in Europe alone, Meta says they have 250 million. So they have almost the number of people in Europe on their service as Twitter has in the world.
Yeah, and the claim in fairness, the other claim, the Twitter people are claiming that people were poached along with their IP. The Meta people are saying we don't have a single person from Twitter working on this project. So it's an interesting back and forth factual dispute, also legal dispute. And for those who have said Musk was down and out, you'll remember, Gary, because I've kind of draft behind you on this. He's lasted longer than many people predicted in terms of the Twitter space, but this would appear to me, you tell me, to be an existential threat, more so than some of the others I've seen so far.
Yeah, I certainly would think that it is. I mean, just based on the sheer number of users and the way that they've been able to, as I pointed out, just the fact that you can one click and start a new account that is linked to an account that you already have and are presumably actively using in your Instagram account. That is a wild advantage that almost no one has. And, they're being smart about it because they've been smacked in the EU a few times recently with not inconsiderable fines. So while I do think that it will come to Europe in 6 or 9 months, they're taking their time so as to not get smacked again. And I think that once they open up those other markets, it's going to be very quick that they're a legitimate competitor with Twitter. And at that point, it's just a matter of what people like more. And for those who, say, well, Elon's going to sue him and it just send Threads into the ether. I don't know. I can't think of another company who has more experience and more legal acumen in copying other people's technology than Meta, because they've done it 100 times before. I mean, if you think about Instagram stories, that's a straight ripoff from Snapchat stories. And the list goes on. There is any number of things like that have just been either copied or they buy the company and then they integrate it into their own software. So they are very experienced at this kind of litigation.
Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating, and I wonder if this is going to end up being a kind of an ideological war with, more people on the left side of the spectrum going to Threads, people on the right side kind of doubling down on Twitter. And that's kind of an interesting understanding or data point going forward to see what happens here.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's a large potential for that sort of a fractioning, going on. And also I think that it's going to be sort of the way that Meta decides to make their rules here. Twitter is very much the free speech marketplace, especially since Musk took over, and they have no real rules on what kind of content you can post. I mean, they have some, but you can post a lot of very explicit things on Twitter. Threads seems to be taking a little bit more of a constrained approach where, there's not as much potentially contentious material that you can post up there. It's going to be interesting, but I think Threads is very much in its infancy and will be a much more robust product a month from now and 3 months from now than it even is today. It's very clear that they rushed this out, a little early because of the tweet limiting thing that happened to Twitter over the 4th of July weekend.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Do you think there's a connection?
I know for sure. I mean, it's not like they developed this as a result of that limitation. They were already working on this, and it had been rumored in the press for quite a while that this was coming. But anyone who's used Threads so far will, with any sort of a experience on the internet, will know that this is a bit of a half-baked product to a certain extent, and that is most clearly as a result of the Twitter limiting their tweet replies and all that happened over the 4th. And I think people at Meta realized they had to seize on this opportunity and get it out there a little earlier than maybe they were expecting. So there's going to be a lot of iterations coming that will improve Threads into a more feature-rich product, I think.
Wow, this is fascinating to watch this unfold and have you and your acumen on the analysis. Thank you.
Well, thank you as well, Mark. We appreciate your time as always on a Sunday, and we look forward to seeing you next week and beyond. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary.
All right.
Thank
bye-bye.
you, everybody, for listening. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.